If you've ever tossed a 1998 Lincoln penny into a jar without a second thought, this video might completely change how you see that coin. Because while most 1998 no-mint mark pennies are worth just 1 cent, a small number of verified examples have sold for prices that shocked even experienced collectors. Not because they're old, not because they're gold, but because of tiny details most people never look for. And in the next few minutes, you're going to discover why this ordinary-looking penny still attracts serious buyer interest, and how a few quiet differences can unlock hidden financial potential. This is where many people get confused, because the 1998 Lincoln penny feels modern. It doesn't look rare. It doesn't look special. And yet, collectors continue to study this date carefully, especially coins without a mint mark. These were struck in Philadelphia, and hundreds of millions were made. But high mintage doesn't always mean low value. What matters is condition, errors, and a handful of varieties that most people never realize exist. Let's take a step back for a moment. The year 1998 sits near the end of the Lincoln Memorial Cent era, which ran from 1959 to 2008. These pennies were made primarily of zinc with a thin copper coating, unlike the solid copper cents of earlier decades. By 1998, production methods were faster, quality control was tighter, and most coins entered circulation almost immediately. That's exactly why truly high-grade examples, coins that somehow avoided wear, scratches, and handling, have become much harder to find than most people expect. Here's a detail collectors quietly watch: the absence of a mint mark. When you see no letter under the date, that means the coin was struck in Philadelphia. While Denver and San Francisco mint marks often draw attention, Philadelphia coins dominate circulation. But dominance doesn't mean uniformity. Even within the same year, some Philadelphia pennies were struck with sharper dies, better centering, stronger detail, and cleaner surfaces. Those subtle differences can completely change collector interest. And this difference can completely change interest, because condition matters more than age. A 1998 penny that circulated for even a few months may show dull surfaces, flattened details, and tiny marks that destroy collector demand. But one that was pulled from rolls, mint sets, or storage and remained untouched can look dramatically different. These top-tier examples, especially those graded by major services, are the ones that quietly produce the highest sale results. Now this is where many people get confused, because they hear 1998 penny and think all examples are basically the same. But that's not how collectors see it. They see strike quality, luster, sharpness in Lincoln's hair, full detail in the memorial building, clean fields with minimal distractions. When all of those come together, a coin that most people ignore can suddenly step into a completely different value category. Some certified 1998 no-mint mark pennies in exceptionally high grades have sold for hundreds, and in rare cases, much more, depending on condition, eye appeal, and timing of the market. These are not everyday results, but they are verified examples that show how quiet wealth discovery sometimes happens when someone checks their coins carefully instead of dismissing them. Here's another detail collectors quietly watch: varieties and errors. While the 1998 penny isn't famous for a long list of dramatic varieties, there are known examples of die cracks, double details, off-center strikes, and plating errors that have attracted serious buyer attention. Most people spend these coins without a second glance, but collectors actively hunt for them because errors introduce scarcity, and scarcity is what drives long-term demand. This is where many people get confused, because they think errors have to be massive to matter. In reality, even subtle doubling in lettering, extra thickness in numbers, or unusual surface texture can elevate a coin into a different tier. These aren't things you notice casually. They're things collectors study under magnification, and they're exactly the kind of details that create hidden financial potential. Now let's talk about realistic value ranges, because credibility matters. In worn, circulated condition, Most 1998 no-mint mark pennies are worth face value, maybe 2 cents to someone filling album slots. That's normal. That's expected. But in strong, uncirculated condition, values can jump into the several dollar range. In certified high-grade condition, select examples have reached into the hundreds, and error coins, depending on severity and rarity, can exceed that. But here's the part most people don't hear. Those higher results don't come from luck. They come from patience. They come from careful inspection. And they come from understanding what collectors actually want, not just what sounds impressive online. This is where many people get confused because they rush to clean their coins. Cleaning is one of the fastest ways to destroy value. Even gentle rubbing can permanently alter surfaces in ways that grading services immediately detect. A cleaned coin often becomes nearly unsellable to serious buyers, no matter how rare the date or interesting the error might have been. The best move is always to leave coins exactly as they are. Another mistake owners make is spending coins without checking both sides closely. Many valuable errors hide in plain sight, doubling in letters, cracks in the die, strange textures, or off-center strikes that aren't obvious at first glance. These differences can completely change interest, and yet millions of potentially valuable coins disappear into circulation every year because no one takes that extra moment to look. Here's a detail collectors quietly watch: original surfaces. Coins that still show natural mint luster, that soft glow that moves across the surface under light, tend to command stronger prices. Once that surface is damaged, even slightly, collector demand drops sharply. This is why 2 pennies from the same year, same mint, and same condition on paper can sell for drastically different amounts. Now let's talk about something that surprises many people. Some of the highest sale results for modern pennies didn't come from rare dates at all. They came from ordinary years in extraordinary condition. That's where quiet wealth discovery often happens. When someone pulls an overlooked coin from a jar, sends it for grading, and learns it's one of the finest known examples. Not common, not guaranteed, but very real. This is where many people get confused, because they assume only very old coins can be valuable. But collectors chase quality, not just age. And in the modern era, high-quality survivors are often scarcer than coins from the early 1900s, simply because people didn't save them carefully. Let's go deeper into what separates common examples from high-value ones. First, centering. Coins struck off-center or unevenly can attract error collectors. Second, strike strength. Sharp details in Lincoln's hair and beard, along with crisp lettering, raise interest. Third, surface preservation. Minimal marks, no stains, no corrosion. And finally, originality, coins that haven't been cleaned, altered, or polished. Here's another detail collectors quietly watch: packaging history. Coins pulled directly from original rolls, mint sets, or long-term storage often survive in better condition than coins from loose circulation. These coins stand a much better chance of achieving grades that place them into premium price tiers. This difference can completely change interest, because a coin that looks nice to the average person may still fall short of collector grade standards. But a coin that looks exceptional, sharp, bright, untouched, suddenly becomes something serious buyers compete for. Now let's address something important: market reality. Prices fluctuate. Collector interest changes. What sold for hundreds once may sell for less later or more. There are no guarantees, but what does remain consistent is that high-grade coins and authentic errors continue to outperform average examples over time. That's where life-changing sale results for select examples come from: not hype, but quality. This is where many people get confused, because they expect fast results, but patient sellers often see the strongest outcomes. Taking time to authenticate, grade, and market a coin properly can make the difference between a modest sale and a meaningful one. Quiet wealth discovery doesn't usually come from rushing, it comes from understanding. Another common mistake is trusting unofficial valuations online. Many listings exaggerate prices or confuse asking prices with actual sale results. The real market is shaped by completed sales, collector demand, and certified condition, not hopeful listings. Serious buyers want verified coins, and that verification changes everything. Here's a detail collectors quietly watch: slabbed coins. When a coin is graded and sealed by a respected grading service, it becomes easier to trade, easier to insure, and easier to trust. That trust often translates into stronger offers, especially for high-grade or error examples of otherwise ordinary dates like 1998. Now imagine this. Somewhere right now, there are 1998 no-mint mark pennies sitting in desk drawers, coin jars, and old piggy banks that haven't been examined in decades. Most are ordinary, but a few, just a few, may carry hidden financial potential simply because they survived in unusually pristine condition or were struck with subtle errors no one noticed. This is where many people get confused, because they think finding something valuable means winning the lottery. But coin collecting isn't about luck, it's about observation. It's about knowing what to look for and taking the time to look closely. That's how quiet wealth discovery actually happens. Let's talk briefly about error types that matter most. Doubled dies, where letters or numbers appear slightly doubled, can draw collector demand. Die cracks, where metal fills cracks in worn dies, can create raised lines on the coin. Off-center strikes, clipped planchets, and plating defects also carry premium interest depending on severity and eye appeal. Each of these can turn an ordinary cent into something collectors compete for. This difference can completely change interest, because while a standard 1998 penny may be worth a cent, a dramatic error can move into double digits, triple digits, or higher depending on rarity and condition. Again, not common, but absolutely real. Now let's talk about what to do if you think you've found something special. First, don't clean it. Second, store it carefully in a soft holder or coin flip. Third, compare it to verified examples from trusted sources or consider professional evaluation. The goal isn't speed, it's accuracy. Knowledge and patience always outperform guessing. This is where many people get confused, because they assume every shiny coin is valuable. But shine alone doesn't matter. It's originality, strike quality, preservation, and rarity that drives serious interest. A bright coin that's been polished is far less desirable than a naturally toned coin with untouched surfaces. Here's a detail collectors quietly watch: consistency. When a coin shows uniform surfaces, balanced color, and natural texture, it signals authenticity and proper storage. That consistency raises confidence, and confidence raises value. So what's the real takeaway about the 1998 no-mint mark Lincoln penny? Most are ordinary, but select examples, especially high-grade coins and legitimate errors, have produced impressive results. Not because of hype, but because collectors recognize scarcity where most people see sameness. That's how hidden financial potential quietly reveals itself. And this is why patient sellers sometimes experience unexpected income, not from chasing trends, not from rushing sales, but from learning what they have, preserving it properly, and letting the right buyers find it at the right time. Before we wrap up, here's something important. Even if your 1998 pennies aren't valuable, the habit of checking them builds knowledge, and knowledge compounds. The more you learn, the better your chances of recognizing something special when it does appear. So take a moment tonight. Look through your change jars, drawers, and old collections. Check the dates. Check the mint marks. Look closely at surfaces and lettering. You might not find anything rare, but then again, quiet wealth discovery often begins with a simple second look. And if you want to continue learning which Lincoln Pennies collectors are watching most closely right now, make sure to watch the next video on your screen. Because in the world of coins, patience and knowledge matter far more than speed. And sometimes, the most ordinary-looking penny holds the most unexpected story. Most people overlook pennies. They sit in jars, drawers, old coffee cans in the garage, and almost never get a second look. But what if one of those ordinary-looking coins quietly carried hidden financial potential? Today, we're talking about the 1979 with D Mint Mark Abraham Lincoln penny, a coin that, in certain verified situations, has sold for prices far beyond what most people would ever expect from a 1-cent piece. Not because it's magic, but because collectors know exactly what to look for. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why this specific penny still gets serious attention today, and how one small detail can completely change interest. Let's start with the era. 1979 was a time of major change in the U.S. economy. Inflation was rising, cash was king, and the U.S. Mint was producing massive numbers of coins to meet everyday demand. The Denver Mint alone struck over 4 billion Lincoln cents that year. So at first glance, the 1979 penny looks common, and in most cases it is. But this is where many people get confused, because in the coin world, rarity doesn't always come from low mintage. It often comes from condition, errors, and subtle variations that only trained collectors spot. And those are exactly the examples that sometimes lead to life-changing sale results for select examples. The 1979 Lincoln cent features the familiar Lincoln Memorial design on the reverse and Abraham Lincoln's portrait on the front. It's made primarily of copper, about 95% copper and 5% zinc, unlike later pennies, which shifted to zinc cores. That copper content alone gives it a different feel, weight, and long-term collector interest. But here's a detail collectors quietly watch. Not all 1979 pennies were struck equally. Some were struck with sharper dies, stronger details, and cleaner surfaces. Others show doubling, unusual textures, or subtle strike anomalies. And while most circulated examples are worth face value, those small differences can dramatically change interest, especially when condition enters the picture. This difference can completely change interest. A worn, brown, circulated 1979 penny is usually worth just a cent or two, maybe a little more in bulk copper sales. But a fully read, uncirculated example, especially one graded by a major certification service, can command prices that surprise most people. In top-tier condition, certified examples have sold for hundreds of dollars, not because the date itself is rare, but because very few survived in flawless condition after decades of circulation, storage, and handling. And collectors pay premiums for coins that look as close as possible to the day they were struck. This is where many people get confused. They assume age alone creates value, but collectors care far more about preservation. Two pennies from the same year can differ in value by hundreds of times simply because one was protected, while the other wasn't. Now let's talk about varieties and errors, the real quiet wealth discovery zone for this coin. Some 1979 pennies show doubled dies, particularly in lettering and date digits. Others have off-center strikes, clipped planchets, or unusual die cracks. These aren't everyday finds, but when authenticated, they attract serious collector interest. Here's a detail collectors quietly watch: doubling that's flat and shelf-like usually comes from machine doubling, which adds little value. But rounded, separated doubling from true doubled dies is something entirely different. And that's where hidden financial potential begins to show up. In confirmed cases, error examples of 1970-90 cents have sold for tens, hundreds, and in rare situations, significantly more depending on the severity, visibility, and overall condition of the coin. This difference can completely change interest. Two coins that look nearly identical to the untrained eye can sit miles apart in the marketplace once magnification, grading, and variety attribution enter the picture. Now let's talk realistic value ranges. Most circulated 1970-90 pennies are worth face value. That's the honest truth. Even attractive brown examples usually sell for just a few cents. Uncirculated examples with full red luster may sell from a few dollars to around $20 depending on eye appeal. Certified high-grade examples, especially those graded MS67 or above, have sold for several $100s, and in rare elite cases higher. Not common, not guaranteed, but verified, and error or variety examples. Those range widely from modest premiums to eye-catching prices depending on the specific anomaly and demand at the time of sale. This is where many people get confused. They see headlines about pennies selling for thousands and assume every coin from that year qualifies. But those results come from select examples, not averages. The difference is knowledge, condition, patience, and verification. Now let's talk about mistakes that reduce value, because this is one of the most important sections of this video. One of the biggest mistakes people make is cleaning coins. Scrubbing, polishing, dipping, even wiping with a cloth permanently damages the surface. And in the coin world, damage doesn't restore value, it destroys it. Here's a detail collectors quietly watch: original surfaces. Even light natural toning is better than artificial shine. A cleaned coin that looks bright often sells for less than a naturally worn one. Another mistake is improper storage. Tossing coins into jars, bags, or loose drawers causes scratches and edge damage over time. A coin that might have been worth hundreds in top condition can drop to near face value simply from careless storage. This difference can completely change interest, because collectors pay for preservation, not just age. Another common mistake: selling too fast. Many people walk into a pawn shop or general coin store and accept the first offer they hear. But patient sellers who take time to understand grading, varieties, and recent auction results sometimes uncover unexpected income. Not overnight wealth, but real, meaningful value that others overlook. This is where many people get confused. They think speed equals success. But in coin collecting, knowledge almost always beats urgency. Now let's talk about how people actually discover valuable 1970 pennies. It often starts casually. Someone rolls through old change, inherits a jar of coins, or finds a childhood collection tucked away. At first glance, everything looks ordinary, but under magnification, details emerge: strong luster, crisp lettering, unusual textures, odd shapes, or alignment issues. Here's a detail collectors quietly watch: the mint mark. The D below the date shows it was struck in Denver, but its size, placement, and strike quality can sometimes signal variety attribution, subtle clues that experts recognize immediately. This difference can completely change interest, because the market doesn't pay for guesses. It pays for verified characteristics. That's why professional grading matters. Certified coins come encapsulated, authenticated, and graded on a 70-point scale, allowing buyers to trust condition and sellers to access broader markets. That alone can multiply interest and demand for select examples. Now let's talk about psychology. Because coins like the 1970 penny don't generate excitement because they're rare, they generate excitement because they're overlooked. Most people never imagine that something so common could carry hidden financial potential. But that's exactly what makes quiet wealth discovery possible. Not hype, not guarantees, but informed curiosity paired with patience. This is where many people get confused. They think rare always means ancient or gold. But sometimes rarity lies in condition, in production quirks, in overlooked details, and in coins that millions of people handled without ever realizing what made certain examples different. And that's exactly why collectors still focus on this date. Not because every 1970 penny is valuable, but because a tiny fraction of them meet standards that the market rewards. Now let's bring this home. If you own old pennies, especially from the late 1970s and early 1980s, the smartest move isn't rushing to sell. It's learning how to look. Use a magnifier, check surfaces, look for doubling, study strike quality, compare to verified graded examples, And most importantly, don't clean them. This is where many people get confused. They think value comes from hope, but real value comes from understanding. And sometimes, with patience, that understanding leads to unexpected income, not fantasy wealth, not promises, but genuine financial upside that most people never realize was sitting quietly in their change. So here's what I want you to do next. After this video, go check your own pennies, especially your 1970 coins. Look closely, don't rush, don't assume, just observe. And if you want to continue learning which everyday Lincoln Cents collectors are quietly watching right now, watch the next video on your screen. Because knowledge, not luck, is what unlocks hidden financial potential. And remember, in coin collecting, patience always beats speed, and curiosity often leads to discovery. Most people have held a 1978 penny in their hands without ever giving it a second thought. But what if I told you that a small number of verified examples from this exact year, with no mint mark, have quietly sold for prices that surprised even longtime collectors? Not because they're magical, not because they're common, but because of tiny details most people overlook. And in the next few minutes, you're going to learn what makes the 1978 no mint mark Lincoln penny one of the most misunderstood coins in circulation, and why checking yours carefully could reveal hidden financial potential most people never notice. This is where many people get confused, because when they hear no mint mark, they assume rare. But with pennies, no mint mark simply means the coin was struck in Philadelphia. And in 1978, the Philadelphia Mint produced hundreds of millions of Lincoln cents. That sounds like a lot, and it is, but survival condition, minting quality, and specific varieties can completely change collector interest. This difference can completely change interest, and sometimes value. To understand why collectors still watch this date, we need to step back to the late 1970s. The United States was dealing with inflation, metal shortages, and rising production costs. The Lincoln cent had already transitioned to copper-plated zinc in 1982, but in 1978, pennies were still struck in traditional bronze, about 95% copper. That alone gives these coins intrinsic appeal to collectors and long-term holders, especially compared to later zinc-based cents that corrode more easily over time. Here's a detail collectors quietly watch. 1978 pennies were struck at 3 mints. Philadelphia with no mint mark, Denver with a D, and San Francisco with an S, usually for proofs. The no mint mark coins are the most common overall, but they're also the ones that collectors search for in high-grade condition, because pristine examples from circulation strikes are surprisingly difficult to find. This is where many people get confused, because rarity isn't always about how many were made. It's about how many survived in exceptional condition. Millions of 1978 pennies entered circulation, but most were used in daily transactions. They were scratched, dropped, bent, and stored loosely in jars and drawers. Very few were set aside in perfect condition the day they were minted. That's where the real story begins. Let's talk about what separates ordinary examples from coins that attract serious collector interest. A typical circulated 1978 no mint mark penny, one with wear, fading, or scratches, usually trades for just a few cents over face value. Sometimes a dealer might offer a few cents more for copper content, but that's usually where it ends. However, this difference can completely change interest when a coin remains uncirculated, with full original luster, sharp detail, and no visible marks. In the grading world, condition is measured on a 70-point scale. Coins graded MS60 through MS62 are considered uncirculated but may have noticeable contact marks. MS63 through MS64 show stronger eye appeal, but MS65 and higher, that's where collector demand sharply increases and prices rise fast. Certified MS66 or MS67 examples of the 1978 no mint mark penny have sold for amounts that surprise people who think pennies can't be valuable. This is where many people get confused, because the difference between MS65 and MS67 might look invisible to the naked eye. But under magnification, collectors look for razor-sharp Lincoln details, clean fields, strong strike quality, and original mint luster. A single scratch, spot, or dull patch can drop a coin's grade and its market value dramatically. Now let's talk about varieties, because this is where hidden financial potential sometimes lives. Some 1978 pennies show doubled dies, particularly on the date or inscriptions like Liberty or In God We Trust. These aren't the dramatic doubled dies seen on famous era coins, but subtle doubling that serious collectors still seek out. This difference can completely change interest, because a verified doubled die variety, especially in high grade, commands significantly more attention than a normal strike. Another thing collectors quietly watch: off-center strikes, broad strikes, clipped planchets, and other mint errors from 1978 exist, though they're not common. Most people spend these coins without ever realizing they're holding something unusual. But certified error examples from this year have sold for meaningful premiums, depending on the severity, visibility, and condition of the error. Let's talk realistic value ranges, because credibility matters. A worn 1978 no mint mark penny is usually worth face value, sometimes slightly more due to copper content. A clean, lightly circulated example might sell for 10 to 25 cents. Uncirculated coins in rolls or mint condition often sell for a few dollars each. But certified MS65 examples can sell in the tens of dollars. MS66 examples often move into higher double digits, and MS67 coins, when properly authenticated, have recorded sales in the hundreds and, in select cases, higher. This is where many people get confused, because online listings often show extreme asking prices that never result in real sales. What matters isn't what someone hopes to get, it's what verified buyers have actually paid. And in this market, a handful of pristine, professionally graded examples have produced what collectors call life-changing sale results for select examples. Not for everyone, but for the right coin, in the right condition, at the right time. Here's a detail collectors quietly watch: strike quality. Some 1978 cents were weakly struck, especially around Lincoln's hair, beard, and jawline. Coins with full strike detail, crisp separation between design elements, are far scarcer than average. That sharpness matters more than many people realize, because it affects both grade and desirability. Now let's talk about mistakes owners make that reduce value, often permanently. One of the biggest mistakes is cleaning a coin. Even gentle polishing removes original surfaces, destroys mint luster, and leaves microscopic scratches that grading services instantly detect. A cleaned coin almost always becomes worth less than a naturally worn one. This difference can completely change interest, and not in a good way. Another mistake is improper storage. Tossing coins into jars, drawers, or plastic bags causes contact marks over time. Copper pennies are especially vulnerable to spotting, discoloration, and corrosion when exposed to moisture or oils from hands. This is where many people get confused, because a coin that looks shiny to the naked eye may actually be damaged under magnification. A third mistake is trusting raw online prices without verification. Many people assume their penny is valuable because someone listed a similar coin for hundreds or thousands of dollars. But unless that coin sold and was professionally graded, the listing doesn't reflect true market demand. Knowledge and patience matter far more than speed when it comes to real value discovery. Now let's talk about how patient sellers sometimes experience quiet wealth discovery. Many collectors didn't realize what they had until decades later, when grading standards tightened and demand for top population coins increased. Coins that once sold for modest amounts sometimes command far higher prices today, not because the coin changed, but because collector awareness did. This is where many people get confused, because value growth doesn't happen overnight. It happens slowly, quietly, and often invisibly. But when a coin surfaces in exceptional condition, especially one stored untouched for decades, it can create what collectors call hidden financial potential. Not hype, not fantasy, just the natural result of scarcity meeting demand. Here's a detail collectors quietly watch: certified population reports. These reports show how many coins of a certain date and grade exist. For the 1978 no mint mark penny, populations drop sharply at MS66 and above, and become extremely thin at MS67. That scarcity, not mintage, is what drives higher prices. Let's walk through how to check your own coin. First, look at the date, 1978. Then check under the date if there's no mint mark, it was struck in Philadelphia. Next, examine the surfaces under strong light. Look for original reddish-brown or red luster, clean fields, sharp details on Lincoln's hair and jaw, and minimal marks. This difference can completely change interest because surface quality matters more than age. Then look closely at the lettering. Does Liberty look doubled? Does the date appear thicker or shadowed? Are there unusual shapes, missing letters, or offset strikes? These are things collectors quietly watch because they can signal valuable varieties or mint errors. If your coin looks unusually clean or different from others you've seen, the next step isn't selling immediately, it's learning more. Professional grading services can authenticate, grade, and encapsulate coins, which dramatically increases buyer confidence. This is where many people get confused, because raw coins almost always sell for less than certified ones, even if they appear identical. Now let's talk about expectations, because honest education matters. The majority of 1978 no mint mark pennies are common and worth modest amounts. But a very small percentage, those in exceptional condition or with verified varieties, can produce quiet wealth discovery for patient owners. That's the real story. Not hype, not fantasy, but possibility rooted in condition, rarity, and timing. This difference can completely change interest, because when collectors compete for top-grade examples, prices rise sharply. And since most people never preserved pennies carefully in the 1970s, the supply of pristine coins remains extremely limited. Here's a detail collectors quietly watch: color designation. Copper pennies are graded as brown, red-brown, or red. Full red examples retain nearly all of their original mint color, and those are far scarcer decades later. A red-designated 1978 penny in high grade can be worth significantly more than the same coin graded brown, even if everything else is identical. Another thing many people overlook: eye appeal. Two coins can have the same technical grade but vastly different market values based on brightness, strike sharpness, and overall visual impact. This is where many people get confused, because beauty isn't subjective in coin collecting. It's measurable, tradable, and priced into real-world sales. Let's also address proof coins briefly. San Francisco produced proof pennies in 1978. Marked with an S, these are struck differently, with mirror-like surfaces and sharper details, and were sold directly to collectors. While beautiful, they're generally more common in high grade than business strikes from Philadelphia, which is why top-condition, no-mint mark coins often command stronger premiums. This difference can completely change interest, because collectors chase scarcity, not just appearance. A flawless-looking proof penny might sell for less than a circulation strike that survived untouched by chance. Now let's talk about timing. Coin markets move in cycles. Demand rises during periods of economic uncertainty, inflation concerns, or renewed interest in tangible assets. At times, even modest coins see increased attention. This is where patient sellers sometimes benefit most, not because they rushed, but because they waited for the right market moment. This is where many people get confused, because selling too fast can leave value on the table. Knowledge, patience, and proper authentication almost always outperform impulse decisions. If you've inherited old coins, found rolls in storage, or simply saved pennies over the years, this is a moment to slow down and look closer. The 1978 no mint mark penny might look ordinary, but as you've seen, small differences can quietly separate face value from hidden financial potential. Here's a detail collectors quietly watch: original mint rolls. Coins stored untouched in sealed paper rolls from the late 1970s sometimes surface today, and when they do, they often contain coins in far better condition than loose circulation finds. Discoveries like that are rare, but when they happen, they can lead to life-changing sale results for select examples. Now let's bring everything together. Most 1978 no mint mark pennies are common. Some are mildly collectible. A few, those in exceptional condition or with verified varieties, are genuinely scarce, and a very small number have sold for amounts that surprise even experienced collectors. That's not hype, that's documented market behavior. But it only applies to select examples, and only when condition, rarity, and authentication align. This is where many people get confused because they expect every old coin to be valuable. In reality, it's the details, the quiet differences that matter most. And those differences are often invisible until someone looks carefully. So here's your next step. Go find your 1978 pennies. Check the date. Look for the missing mint mark. Examine the surfaces. Study the lettering. And if something looks unusually sharp, clean, or different, take your time before doing anything else. Knowledge and patience matter more than speed. And if you want to learn about another penny date that has surprised collectors with hidden financial potential, watch the next video on your screen. Because some of the most interesting discoveries come from the coins people overlook the longest. Sometimes, quiet wealth discovery doesn't come from chasing the rarest coin on earth, but from understanding the ordinary coin already sitting in your hand. Most people look at a 1977 penny and think, pocket change. Something you toss in a jar, drop in a parking meter, or forget in a drawer. But what if I told you that certain verified examples of the 1977 Lincoln penny, especially those with no mint mark, have sold for prices that surprise even long-time collectors? Not because every 1977 penny is rare, not because everyone is valuable, but because a small number of overlooked details can quietly transform an ordinary coin into something collectors actively compete for. And in some cases, those details have led to life-changing sale results for select examples. So before you dismiss that 1977 penny sitting in your home right now, stay with me. Because this is one of those coins where patience, knowledge, and a careful eye can unlock hidden financial potential. Now let's start with what this coin really is. The 1977 Lincoln penny with no mint mark was struck at the Philadelphia Mint, which didn't use mint marks on cents during that era. More than 4.5 billion of these pennies were produced, so yes, it's common. But here's where many people get confused. High mintage does not mean zero value. It means most examples are ordinary, but a tiny percentage stand out in ways that collectors care deeply about. This was the late 1970s. Inflation was rising, copper prices were climbing, and the U.S. Mint was still producing pennies made of 95% copper. That copper content alone gives every 1977 penny an intrinsic metal value higher than face value. But metal content is just the starting point. The real story begins with condition, strike quality, and rare variations. This is where many people get confused. Most people assume that if a coin doesn't have a mint mark, it's somehow less valuable. In reality, no mint mark simply means it was struck in Philadelphia. And for some dates, including 1977, Philadelphia coins are the ones that produce the most dramatic high-grade results. Collectors pay attention to three main versions of the 1977 penny: Philadelphia with no mint mark, Denver with a D mint mark, and San Francisco proof coins. Today, we're focused on the Philadelphia version, the one millions of Americans unknowingly already own. Most circulated 1977 pennies are worth just a few cents, maybe up to 25 cents in attractive condition. But this difference can completely change interest. When you move from circulated coins into high-grade uncirculated examples, especially those with sharp strikes and blazing original luster, values begin to rise fast. This is where many people get confused. Two coins from the same year can look almost identical to the untrained eye, yet one might be worth 10 cents, and another might quietly sell for hundreds or more. The difference lies in microscopic wear, strike strength, surface preservation, and how cleanly the coin left the dies. In the world of professional grading, 1977, no mint mark pennies graded M-65 red and above start drawing attention. Coins graded M-67 red and higher become scarce. And in elite registry grade condition, verified examples have sold for prices that surprise even experienced collectors. This is where collectors quietly watch color quality. A fully red copper penny with no dark spots, no stains, no carbon flecks, and no wear is dramatically harder to find than most people realize, especially after nearly 50 years of exposure to air, moisture, and handling. But that's not the only factor. Strike quality also matters. Some 1977 pennies were struck weakly, especially in Lincoln's hair and beard, or in the wheat ears of earlier designs. But in this era, it's Lincoln's cheekbone, jawline, and the word liberty that reveal strike strength. Sharply struck examples with full detail stand out immediately to trained graders. Now here's a detail collectors quietly watch: surface originality. Many people unknowingly clean their coins, thinking it makes them more valuable. In reality, cleaning almost always lowers collector value, sometimes permanently. Even light polishing can turn a potentially valuable penny into a common one. This difference can completely change interest. Untouched coins with natural surfaces consistently outperform cleaned coins, even when the cleaned coin looks brighter to casual observers. Let's talk realistic value ranges. Most circulated 1977 no mint mark pennies are worth between face value and about 25 cents. Nice uncirculated examples might sell for $1 to $5. Higher grade certified coins, those graded M-65 red, can bring $10 to $30. But once you reach M-67 red and above, prices can jump into the hundreds. And for the very best known examples, verified auction results have crossed into four-figure territory. Not common, not typical, but real and documented for select examples in exceptional condition. This is where many people get confused. Rarity doesn't always come from low mintage. Sometimes rarity comes from survival. Billions were struck, but very few survived in perfect condition with original surfaces and blazing red color. That's what creates scarcity at the top. Now let's talk about varieties, because this is where hidden financial potential sometimes shows up when people least expect it. Some 1977 pennies show doubled dies, repunched mint marks on Denver coins, off-center strikes, clipped planchets, or broad strikes. While most of these errors are minor and carry modest value, certain dramatic mint errors can command strong collector interest. This is where collectors quietly watch. Doubling in the date, liberty, or in God we trust that shows true separation, not machine doubling, can transform a coin from ordinary to highly desirable. But true doubled dies are rare and require magnification and experience to identify correctly. This is where many people get confused. Not all doubling is valuable. Most doubling seen on modern coins is mechanical or strike-related and carries little premium. True hub doubling, however, produces rounded, separated lettering and is far scarcer. Now let's talk about mistakes owners make, because this is one of the biggest reasons valuable coins get lost. First, cleaning. Even soaking a penny in vinegar, baking soda, or commercial cleaners destroys surface originality. Second, improper storage. Leaving coins loose in jars or drawers exposes them to moisture, friction, and environmental damage. Third, selling too quickly. Many people cash in coins without understanding what they actually have, especially when they see only face value. This is where patient sellers sometimes discover unexpected income. Not because every coin becomes valuable, but because careful sorting, professional grading, and timing can reveal quiet wealth discovery hiding in plain sight. This difference can completely change interest. Submitting the right coin for professional grading can unlock credibility in the marketplace, making it eligible for top-tier auction platforms where serious collectors compete instead of casual buyers. Now let's walk through how to evaluate your own 1977 penny. Start with mint mark or the absence of one. No mint mark means Philadelphia. Next, check condition. Does the coin show wear on Lincoln's cheek, jawline, or coat? If yes, it's circulated. If no, it may be uncirculated. Then examine color. Is the coin bright red or brown? Red coins carry higher premiums. Look for spots, stains, corrosion, or fingerprints. All reduce value. Check strike sharpness, especially in Liberty and Lincoln's hair. And finally, use magnification to look for doubling or unusual errors. This is where many people get confused. Just because a coin is old doesn't mean it's valuable. And just because a coin looks ordinary doesn't mean it lacks potential. The market rewards preservation, not age alone. Now here's a detail collectors quietly watch: population reports. These reports show how many coins have been graded at each level. For 1977 pennies, the population drops dramatically above M-66 red. That sharp drop is exactly where value acceleration begins. This difference can completely change interest. Two pennies from the same roll can end up worlds apart in market value, depending on tiny grading details invisible to casual inspection. Let's talk about real-world selling behavior. Some people stumble across high-grade coins when searching inherited collections, old mint sets, or sealed bank rolls from the 1970s. Others find them in old coffee cans, desk drawers, or estate boxes that haven't been touched in decades. In rare cases, careful sorting uncovers coins that were never circulated, quietly waiting for the right eyes to recognize their potential. That's where life-changing sale results for select examples become possible, not common, not guaranteed, but real, and always tied to condition, rarity, and verified demand. This is where many people get confused. Value isn't created by hype. It's created by scarcity, documentation, collector demand, and condition. That's why some 1977 pennies sell for cents, while others attract serious bids. Now let's talk about what not to do. Don't assume online listings showing huge prices mean your coin is worth that amount. Asking prices are not selling prices. Always look at completed auction results. Don't clean your coins. Don't rush to sell without understanding grading standards. And don't ignore professional authentication when a coin appears exceptional. This is where collectors quietly watch: emotional discipline. The best sellers aren't the fastest sellers. They're the ones who verify, protect, and present their coins properly. Now here's something many people don't realize. Even if your 1977 penny doesn't turn out to be a high-value example, learning how to evaluate it builds skills that apply to every other coin you own. That knowledge compounds over time, turning casual curiosity into real financial awareness. And sometimes, that's how quiet wealth discovery actually begins. So here's your takeaway. Most 1977 no-mint mark Lincoln pennies are ordinary, but a very small percentage, those with exceptional condition, premium color, strong strikes, or rare errors, can command strong collector interest and, in select cases, dramatic auction results. Not because of luck, not because of hype, but because careful preservation and rarity intersect. Before you move on, take a moment to check your own pennies. Look at the ones from 1977. Look closely. Use a magnifier. Compare surfaces, color, and strike detail. You may find nothing unusual, and that's normal. But every once in a while, someone discovers something extraordinary hiding in plain sight. If you want to continue this journey, watch the next video on another overlooked Lincoln penny date that has surprised collectors with unexpected value potential. Because in coin collecting, knowledge and patience almost always outperform speed. And sometimes, the smallest coins tell the biggest stories.
If you've ever glanced at a 1976 penny and thought, this one's probably just pocket change, stay with me, because some verified examples of this exact coin, especially with the D mint mark, have sold for prices that surprised even longtime collectors. Not every coin, of course, but a small number of them have quietly produced life-changing sale results for select owners. And what makes this story so interesting is that most people who own those coins had no idea what they were holding until the right detail was noticed. That's what today's video is about. The 1976 D. Lincoln penny, what makes it ordinary in most cases, and what makes certain examples stand out in extraordinary ways. The year 1976 wasn't just another year in American history. It marked the United States bicentennial, 200 years since the nation's founding. And although pennies didn't receive a special bicentennial design like quarters, half dollars, and dollars did, Lincoln cents were still being produced in massive numbers to meet circulation demand. The Denver Mint struck hundreds of millions of pennies that year, each bearing the small D mint mark beneath the date. On the surface, this sounds like a recipe for a common coin, and most 1976 D pennies are exactly that. But this is where many people get confused. High mintage doesn't automatically mean zero collector interest. It simply means collectors start looking closer for specific qualities, varieties, and conditions that separate everyday change from hidden financial potential. What makes the 1976 D penny especially interesting is that it sits at a crossroads in modern U.S. coinage. By this point, Lincoln cents were being struck in copper-plated zinc, not solid copper, which changed how coins aged, toned, and survived in circulation. This also created new opportunities for mint errors and striking irregularities, some subtle, some dramatic. And collectors quietly watch these kinds of details because that's often where quiet wealth discovery begins. This is where many people get confused. Not all 1976 D pennies are created equal, even though they look identical at first glance. Most examples you'll find in jars, drawers, or old rolls are heavily circulated. Dull brown color, worn lettering, soft details on Lincoln's hair and jawline. Those usually trade for face value or just a few cents. But coins with original luster, clean surfaces, and sharp detail, especially those graded by professional services, exist in much smaller numbers. And scarcity in top condition is one of the strongest drivers of collector value. Here's a detail collectors quietly watch: surface quality. On copper-plated zinc pennies, even small scratches, bubbles, or plating flaws can drastically reduce desirability. Coins that avoided damage during striking, storage, and circulation become significantly more appealing decades later. A 1976 D penny graded MS65 or MS66, meaning mint state, nearly flawless, can sell for many times face value. And in top grades, auction prices have sometimes climbed into levels that surprise people who assumed modern pennies were worthless. This difference can completely change interest, and that difference often comes down to condition alone. Two coins struck on the same day from the same mint can have radically different financial outcomes decades later. One becomes spare change. The other becomes a collector centerpiece. Now let's talk about mint marks and compositions. All 1976 D pennies were struck at the Denver Mint and bear a D below the date. They were made using copper-plated zinc planchets, meaning a thin copper layer over a zinc core. This matters because collectors sometimes encounter plating errors, exposed zinc, improper bonding, or off-metal strikes. While rare, these varieties can generate strong demand, especially when certified. This is where many people get confused. Not every odd-looking penny is valuable. Environmental damage, corrosion, or chemical exposure can make a coin look unusual but worthless. True mint errors happen during the manufacturing process, and experienced collectors, graders, and buyers know the difference. That's why professional authentication matters so much in this area. Some of the known varieties collectors quietly search for in 1976 D pennies include off-center strikes, broad strikes, clipped planchets, doubled dies, and dramatic plating flaws. Not all of these bring large sums, but high-grade examples, especially with eye appeal, can sometimes sell for hundreds or more. And while these don't appear every day, they do appear often enough that patient sellers continue to find unexpected income in ordinary-looking collections. This difference can completely change interest, because a common date coin suddenly becomes something rare, visual, and exciting. Now let's talk realistic value ranges, because credibility matters here. Most circulated 1976 D pennies are worth face value. That's the honest truth. Uncirculated examples in average mint state condition might sell for a few cents to $1, but coins graded MS65 or higher by professional services often trade in the $10 to $40 range, sometimes more depending on market demand. In top population grades, coins with virtually flawless surfaces and exceptional eye appeal, verified auction results have reached into the hundreds, and in select cases, significantly higher. This is where many people get confused. Those higher prices don't mean every coin will sell that way. They reflect rare combinations of grade, preservation, and timing. But they also prove something important. Modern pennies can produce quiet wealth discovery when the right factors align. And that's why patient sellers sometimes discover unexpected income years after the coin was struck. Now let's talk about mistakes, because this is where value is most often lost. The first mistake is cleaning coins. Polishing a penny, scrubbing it with chemicals, or even wiping it with a cloth can permanently damage the surface and destroy collector value. A cleaned coin, even if rare, usually sells for far less than an untouched example. This is one of the biggest reasons potentially valuable coins end up dismissed. The second mistake is assuming discoloration equals rarity. Dark spots, peeling copper, or rough texture usually signal environmental damage, not mint errors. This is where many people get confused. Genuine errors typically show sharp, mechanical characteristics, not random corrosion patterns. The third mistake is selling too fast. Some owners dump rolls or jars of pennies without checking dates, mint marks, or conditions. And while most coins in those jars are ordinary, every year collectors hear stories of overlooked varieties or high-grade survivors that were nearly lost. That's why knowledge and patience matter more than speed. Here's a detail collectors quietly watch: original mint luster. When light reflects smoothly across a coin's surface in rotating bands, that's often a sign of strong preservation, and collectors pay attention. Even without rare varieties, that single factor can dramatically change interest. Now let's talk about psychology, because this coin represents something bigger than metal and mint marks. The 1976 D penny reminds us that value doesn't always announce itself loudly. It sits unnoticed in drawers, piggy banks, and collections, quietly waiting for the right person to look closer. That's why stories of quiet wealth discovery resonate so strongly with collectors. It's not about luck. It's about awareness, patience, and knowing what details matter. This difference can completely change interest, because suddenly a coin isn't just spare change anymore. It becomes a historical artifact, a market asset, and sometimes a surprisingly meaningful financial opportunity. Now, does every 1976 D penny lead to life-changing sale results? Absolutely not. Most won't. But select examples absolutely have, and that's the key distinction. The opportunity isn't guaranteed. The possibility lies in the details. And that's exactly why collectors and buyers still focus on this date. Not because it's rare overall, but because exceptional survivors, error coins, and top-grade examples are scarce enough to command attention. That balance between common and extraordinary is what creates long-term collector interest. This is where many people get confused. Rarity doesn't always mean low mintage. Sometimes it means low survival in premium condition. And with zinc-based pennies especially, pristine examples become harder to find with each passing year. So what should you do if you own 1976D pennies? First, check condition carefully. Look for sharp details, smooth surfaces, and original shine. Second, look for errors, off-center strikes, unusual thickness, missing or distorted lettering, or exposed zinc layers. Third, avoid cleaning. And fourth, consider professional grading if you believe your coin stands out, because certification often unlocks collector trust and higher market demand. This difference can completely change interest, not just for buyers, but for sellers too. And here's the most important takeaway: knowledge and patience matter more than speed. The people who discovered unexpected income from ordinary-looking pennies didn't rush. They learned what to look for, waited for the right moment, and let the market do its work. That's how quiet wealth discovery happens, not through hype, but through informed decisions. So if you have old pennies at home, especially from the 1970s, take another look. That small D mint mark beneath the date might not seem exciting, but the right example can tell a very different story. And before you go, there's another penny date that's produced even more surprising results, especially in unexpected conditions. You'll want to see that one next. Because when it comes to coins, sometimes the smallest details create the biggest outcomes.
Most people see a penny and think nothing of it, but every once in a while, one quiet coin turns into something far more interesting. Today's story is about the 1972 Lincoln penny with no mint mark, a coin that millions of Americans once carried in their pockets, and yet a small number of verified examples have sold for prices that surprised even experienced collectors. Not because every 1972 penny is rare, far from it, but because certain versions quietly stand apart. And if you've ever wondered whether an ordinary-looking coin could hold hidden financial potential, this is one date you'll want to stay with until the end. Here's the part that catches most people off guard. The 1972 penny without a mint mark was struck in Philadelphia, back when mint marks weren't always placed on coins from that facility. More than 2 billion were made. Yes, billion. So on the surface, this seems like one of the most common Lincoln cents in existence. But this is where many people get confused, because inside that massive production run are a few extremely unusual varieties that collectors actively hunt for, and when authentic examples surface, they can bring life-changing sale results for select examples. To understand why this coin still matters, you have to go back to the early 1970s. The US Mint was producing coins at enormous speed to meet circulation demand. Equipment was running hard, dies were wearing out faster, and quality control wasn't what it is today. Most coins came out normal, but some didn't. And when errors or varieties slipped through, especially dramatic ones, collectors noticed. That's exactly what happened with the most famous version of the 1972 no-mint mark penny. This is where many people get confused, because when someone hears valuable 1972 penny, they often assume it's about age or silver content. But 1972 pennies are copper, not silver, and age alone doesn't drive value here. What drives attention is a specific doubling error on the front of the coin, one that's strong enough to be seen clearly with the naked eye. This difference can completely change interest from pocket change to something collectors quietly compete for. Let's slow this down and make it simple. A standard 1972 no-mint mark penny is made of 95% copper and 5% zinc, weighs about 3.11 grams, and shows Abraham Lincoln on the front with the Lincoln Memorial on the back. In circulated condition, most of these coins are worth about 1 cent to maybe 2 or 3 cents in bulk copper value. Even uncirculated examples, coins that never entered circulation, often trade for only a few dollars. But here's a detail collectors quietly watch: the famous 1972 double-die obverse variety. On this rare version, the date, the word liberty, and the phrase "In God We Trust" appear doubled not from damage, not from wear, but from a misaligned die during the minting process. And the doubling is bold. It's not subtle. On genuine examples, You can clearly see separation between the letters and numbers. This isn't something you need a microscope to spot, and that's exactly why this variety became legendary. This is where many people get confused, because not every blurry or thick-looking 1972 penny is valuable. Most doubling people see is mechanical doubling or wear, and that adds no premium. Only the true double die obverse variety carries significant collector interest. But when it's real, the market response is very different. Over the years, verified examples of this variety in circulated condition have sold for hundreds of dollars. Higher-grade examples, especially those certified by professional grading services, have sold for thousands. And in the strongest mint-state grades, some have reached five-figure results at auction. That's not typical, and it's certainly not guaranteed, but it shows how dramatic the difference can be between an ordinary coin and a rare variety hiding in plain sight. This difference can completely change interest, and it's why people still check their 1972 pennies today. But let's bring expectations back to reality, because most viewers won't own the double die version. And that's okay. Even standard 1972 no-mint mark pennies still hold quiet collector interest in certain conditions. Coins that are fully red, sharply struck, and untouched by circulation can sell for small but meaningful premiums over face value. In certified mint state condition, some normal examples bring $10, $20, or more depending on quality. Not life-changing, but part of a broader quiet wealth discovery for people who have saved coins carefully over decades. Here's a detail collectors quietly watch: surface quality. Many people accidentally destroy value without realizing it. Cleaning a coin, polishing it, or soaking it in chemicals removes original surfaces and lowers collector appeal dramatically, even if the coin looked dirty before. This is where many people get confused, because a shiny coin doesn't always mean a valuable coin. In fact, cleaned coins almost always sell for less than untouched ones. Another mistake people make is assuming all doubling means big money. The real double die variety on the 1972 penny shows clear separation on the date and lettering, not flat shelf-like doubling, not shadowing, and not damage. If you're unsure, comparing your coin to verified images from reputable numismatic sources or having it examined by a professional is the safest move. Now let's talk realistic value ranges. A typical circulated 1972 no-mint mark penny is usually worth 1 cent to maybe 3 cents in copper value. An uncirculated standard example might sell for a few dollars, depending on eye appeal. But the famous double die obverse variety, circulated examples often sell in the hundreds. Mid-grade certified examples have sold in the low thousands, and top-tier mint-state examples, especially with strong eye appeal, have achieved results that feel almost unreal for a penny. This is where many people get confused, because headlines often focus on the highest sale ever, not the typical results. Most examples won't reach those levels, but for select coins, patience, proper identification, and professional grading have led to life-changing sale results for select examples, quietly, without hype, and without shortcuts. Another detail collectors quietly watch: originality. Coins stored for decades in drawers, jars, or inherited collections sometimes survive in surprisingly strong condition, especially if they were set aside shortly after minting. These are the kinds of discoveries that don't happen every day, but they do happen. And when they do, they remind people why collectors still search through ordinary change. This difference can completely change interest, not because every coin becomes valuable, but because some coins quietly separate themselves from the rest when the details line up. Let's talk about something else people overlook: timing. The coin market doesn't reward speed, it rewards knowledge and patience. Some sellers rush to unload coins without understanding what they have. Others take time to research, verify, and choose the right moment to sell. That patience has sometimes turned ordinary-looking coins into unexpected income stories. Not overnight wealth, not guarantees, but meaningful results that came from understanding rather than luck. This is where many people get confused, because they think coin collecting is about gambling. It isn't. It's about information, condition, rarity, and demand, and how those forces quietly intersect over time. So if you have 1972 pennies, what should you actually do? First, look closely at the front of the coin, especially the date, liberty, and in God we trust. If the doubling is bold and clearly separated, not flat or blurry, that's when deeper research becomes worthwhile. Second, don't clean it, ever, even if it looks dirty. Third, compare it to verified examples online from major grading services or auction archives. And if something looks promising, professional evaluation can protect you from misidentification and costly mistakes. Here's a detail collectors quietly watch. Weight. Most 1972 pennies should weigh about 3.11 grams. A major deviation could indicate damage, plating, or alterations, not added value. Serious buyers care about originality, not experiments. Now let's step back and talk about why this coin still fascinates people more than 50 years later. It's not just about money. It's about the idea that something ordinary, something millions of people handled, can contain a quiet exception. A small number of coins escaped the mint with unusual characteristics, and those coins ended up shaping one of the most famous Lincoln cent varieties in modern U.S. coinage. This difference can completely change interest because it turns everyday objects into stories. Stories of overlooked details, stories of patience, stories of quiet wealth discovery that didn't come from hype, but from attention. And while most 1972 pennies will never be rare, a few already are and always will be. This is where many people get confused because they think rarity means age. In reality, rarity means scarcity within demand. And the double-die 1972 penny checks both boxes. That's why collectors still care. That's why auction records still get attention. And that's why people continue searching through jars of coins decades later. If you've inherited pennies, saved change for years, or simply enjoy looking more closely at everyday objects, this date is worth understanding, not because it promises wealth, but because it rewards awareness. Some people discover nothing, others discover a coin worth a few dollars, and once in a rare while, someone uncovers something that leads to truly unexpected results. That's not common, but it's real. And it's part of what keeps collectors searching. Before you go, take a moment to check your own 1972 pennies carefully, especially the ones without mint marks. Look at the letters, look at the date, look at the surfaces. And remember, knowledge and patience matter far more than speed. If you want to continue learning about pennies that collectors quietly watch, there's another video waiting that breaks down a different Lincoln cent date with surprising market behavior. And sometimes, the next quiet discovery is closer than you think, sitting unnoticed in a jar, a drawer, or a forgotten envelope, waiting for someone who knows what to look for. If you've ever sorted through a jar of old pennies and noticed a 1968 Lincoln cent with no mint mark, this might be one of those moments where ordinary change quietly turns into something far more interesting. Because while most of these coins are worth just a cent or two, a small number of verified examples have sold for prices that surprised even experienced collectors. Not guarantees, not promises, but documented results that make people stop, look again, and realize how much difference tiny details can make. And here's what makes this story so compelling. The 1968 no-mint mark penny was produced in enormous quantities. Millions upon millions entered circulation, passed through countless hands, and ended up in drawers, jars, and piggy banks across America. Which means the odds are high that you've seen one before, but the odds are also high that you've never seen the kind collectors quietly watch for. This is where many people get confused, because rarity doesn't always come from age alone. It often comes from condition, subtle variations, and mistakes that most people never notice. Let's start with the basics. A 1968 Lincoln penny without a mint mark means it was struck at the Philadelphia Mint. That year, the U.S. Mint was recovering from a massive coin shortage earlier in the decade, and production was still running at intense levels. These coins were made for circulation, not collectors, and quality control wasn't as strict as it is today. That environment is exactly why certain unexpected varieties and condition rarities exist, and why some collectors consider 1968 one of the most misunderstood dates in modern Lincoln's sense. This is where many people get confused, because when they hear no mint mark, they sometimes assume it automatically means rare. It doesn't. Most 1968 no mint mark pennies are extremely common. In circulated condition, they usually sell for just 1 to 3 cents. Even clean examples might only reach 10 or 20 cents. But here's a detail collectors quietly watch. The difference between an ordinary coin and a premium example isn't the date alone. It's the strike quality, surface preservation, and whether the coin shows unusual die characteristics. The 1968 penny was struck in a copper alloy, 95% copper and 5% zinc, giving it that warm reddish tone when new. And collectors grade these coins by color, using 3 main categories: brown, red-brown, and red. A fully red coin means it still retains nearly all of its original mint luster, and that difference can completely change interest. A circulated brown coin might be worth a few cents, but a sharply struck red example in high grade can move into double-digit or even triple-digit territory. This is where the story starts to shift. Certified mint state examples graded MS66 or MS67 red have sold for hundreds of dollars. And in rare cases, where strike quality, surface preservation, and eye appeal all align, prices have climbed even higher. Not because the coin is old, not because it's rare in population, but because surviving examples in near-perfect condition are genuinely scarce. This is where many people get confused, because they assume condition means not worn. But collectors go much deeper. They look for sharp detail in Lincoln's hair, strong separation in the beard, clean fields without spots or carbon marks, and full strike definition in the wheat stalks on the reverse. 2 coins from the same year can look similar to the casual eye, yet one sells for $1 and the other for several hundred. That difference can completely change interest. Now let's talk about varieties. This is where the 1968 no mint mark penny becomes especially interesting. Some examples show doubled die features, subtle doubling in the lettering or date caused during the die creation process. These are not common, and they're often mistaken for simple machine doubling, which carries no premium. But genuine doubled dies can create serious collector demand. Here's a detail collectors quietly watch: doubling that appears thick and rounded, especially on letters like Liberty or the numbers in the date, rather than flat or shelf-like distortion. Authentic doubled dies from this era have sold for far more than normal examples, particularly when preserved in high grades. Again, not guarantees, but documented outcomes that show how hidden financial potential can exist in plain sight. Another area collectors watch closely is off-center strikes, broad strikes, clipped planchets, and other mint errors. Most 1968 pennies were struck normally, but a tiny fraction escaped the mint with these defects. And when they did, they created coins that collectors now actively pursue. A dramatic off-center strike showing a full date, for example, can command significant premiums, sometimes reaching into the hundreds, depending on severity and condition. This is where many people get confused, because damage is not the same as a mint error. A bent coin, scratched surface, or altered edge usually destroys value, but a genuine error created during production often increases interest. That difference can completely change interest, and it's one of the biggest reasons people unknowingly spend coins that collectors would gladly buy. Now let's talk realistically about values. For most circulated 1968 no mint mark pennies, you're looking at 1 to 5 cents. Clean uncirculated examples might range from 50 cents to a few dollars. Certified high-grade red examples in MS66 or MS67 condition have sold from $100 to over $400 in verified auctions. Exceptional strike quality combined with top-tier grading has occasionally pushed results higher, not common, not guaranteed, but documented. And then there are the varieties and eras. Authentic double dies, dramatic off-center strikes, and rare mint eras can produce life-changing sale results for select examples. Not for everyone, not for most coins, but enough to keep collectors carefully studying this date year after year. This is where many people get confused. They assume value comes from age alone. But in modern Lincoln sense, age is only the starting point. What truly matters is preservation, precision, and rarity within condition categories. A worn 1909 cent can be worth less than a flawless 1968, and that reality surprises many first-time sellers. Let's talk about mistakes owners make that quietly destroy value. The biggest one is cleaning. Even gentle rubbing with a cloth can leave microscopic scratches that permanently reduce collector appeal. Harsh chemical cleaning can remove original surfaces entirely, making a potentially valuable coin nearly unsellable to serious buyers. Another mistake is improper storage. Tossing coins into jars, pockets, or drawers exposes them to friction and moisture, which degrades surfaces over time. Here's a detail collectors quietly watch: original surfaces. Coins that have never been cleaned, polished, or altered command far stronger prices than ones that look artificially shiny. That difference can completely change interest, especially at higher grades where authenticity and surface originality matter most. Another common mistake is overlooking certification. Many sellers assume grading services aren't worth it for modern coins, and in most cases they're right. But for high-end examples, particularly those with pristine surfaces, strong luster, or suspected varieties, professional certification can transform uncertainty into credibility. And credibility is what attracts serious buyers willing to pay premium prices. This is where many people get confused. They rush to sell without knowing what they have. And speed rarely benefits sellers in numismatics. The most successful outcomes usually come from patience, careful inspection, and waiting for the right buyer rather than the first offer. Now let's talk about something collectors don't always say out loud: a quiet wealth discovery. It doesn't usually happen in dramatic moments. It happens slowly. Someone checks a jar, notices a coin looks unusually sharp, sets it aside, researches a little more, and eventually discovers it's worth far more than expected. Not millions, not instant riches, but meaningful, surprising, and deeply satisfying, especially when the coin was hiding in plain sight for decades. This is where many people get confused. They think stories of high-value modern pennies are exaggerations. But the auction records are real. The premiums are real. And the reason those results happen is because condition rarity is real. Millions of coins were struck, but only a tiny fraction survive in elite condition, untouched, uncleaned, and perfectly preserved. Here's a detail collectors quietly watch: strike sharpness. Some 1968 pennies were struck weakly, especially around Lincoln's hair and jawline. Others were struck crisply, with strong separation in every design element. Those sharper examples consistently outperform softer ones, even at the same grade. That difference can completely change interest and final selling price. Another overlooked detail is spotting and toning. Copper coins are especially sensitive to environmental exposure. A coin that develops unattractive dark spots loses appeal even if technically uncirculated. But a coin with clean surfaces and original luster becomes far more desirable. Again, tiny differences, massive value impact. This is where many people get confused. They assume shiny means valuable, but collectors prefer natural surfaces over artificial brightness. A dull red-brown coin with original surfaces often outperforms a polished coin that looks brighter but has lost its authenticity. Now let's pull this together. The 1968 no-mint mark Lincoln penny is not rare in quantity, but it can be rare in quality. And in numismatics, quality scarcity often matters more than absolute population. That's why collectors still study this date. That's why grading services still see submissions for it. And that's why auction records continue to surprise people who thought this was just another common penny. And here's the part most people miss: value doesn't come from rushing. It comes from learning, from checking details, from understanding the difference between ordinary and exceptional. That's where hidden financial potential quietly lives. If you have 1968 pennies, look closely. Check for sharp detail. Look for doubling in the lettering. Watch for unusual strike characteristics. And most importantly, resist the urge to clean or alter anything. Sometimes, the smallest details carry the biggest consequences. Because while most of these coins will always be common, select examples have produced life-changing sale results for a few patient owners. Not by luck, not by hype, but by knowledge, condition awareness, and timing. Before you go, I encourage you to watch another video on rare Lincoln cent varieties, because many of the most valuable coins aren't the oldest ones. They're the ones people misunderstood for decades. And remember, in coin collecting, patience almost always beats speed, and learning almost always beats guessing. Your next quiet wealth discovery might already be sitting in your pocket, waiting for you to notice what others missed. If you've ever opened a jar of old pennies and wondered whether any of them might be special, today's coin might surprise you. Because the 1964 Lincoln penny with a D-mint mark is one of the most commonly saved cents in American history. And yet, some verified examples of this exact date and mint have sold for prices that shocked even experienced collectors. Not because everyone is rare, but because a small number carry hidden traits that quietly change everything. And by the end of this video, you'll know exactly what to look for and why patience, not luck, is what leads to the biggest discoveries. The year 1964 sits at a fascinating moment in U.S. history. America was booming. Coins were flowing through the economy at massive levels, and the Denver Mint struck hundreds of millions of Lincoln cents that year. The design still featured Abraham Lincoln on the front and the Lincoln Memorial on the back, a style that had been used since 1959. At first glance, the 1964 D penny looks like one of the most ordinary coins imaginable. And that's exactly why it's so often overlooked. But here's where many people get confused: popularity does not eliminate potential. In fact, sometimes the most widely saved coins end up producing the most surprising high-grade survivors, eras, and varieties, and those are the coins that collectors quietly watch. Most 1964 D pennies were made from 95% copper and 5% zinc and tin, giving them that classic reddish tone when well preserved. Millions entered circulation immediately, and many were stored in jars, drawers, and coin folders. That's why you still see them today in estate collections, piggy banks, and inherited coin boxes. But collectors don't just care about age. They care about condition, strike quality, and small production quirks that can completely change interest. This difference can completely change interest, because while a heavily circulated 1964 D penny may only be worth a few cents over face value, a sharply struck, original red example graded by a major service can sell for dramatically higher amounts, sometimes hundreds, and in select cases, thousands of dollars. These are not everyday results, but they are real, documented sales that prove why this date still commands attention. Now let's talk about why collectors continue to focus on the 1964 D specifically. First, it represents one of the last high-mintage copper cents before major changes in U.S. coinage composition came later in the decade. Second, Denver-minted cents from this era often show weaker strikes than their Philadelphia counterparts, which means fully struck examples with sharp details are scarcer than their production numbers suggest. And third, certain varieties and minting anomalies from this year quietly attract serious demand, even when the rest of the date looks ordinary. Here's a detail collectors quietly watch: the strength of the strike on Lincoln's hair, beard, and coat lines, as well as the sharpness of the Lincoln Memorial columns on the reverse. Coins with full detail in these areas are far less common than most people realize, and grading services reward that sharply when assigning high mint state grades. Let's talk about what separates common examples from high-value ones. Most circulated 1964 D pennies, those with wear, dull surfaces, or darkened color, usually trade for just a few cents over face value. Even lightly circulated examples often stay under $1. But once a coin reaches uncirculated condition, the story begins to change. Red-colored, original mint luster examples, graded MS65 or higher, start entering serious collector territory. This is where many people get confused. Not all shiny coins are equal. Two pennies can look nearly identical to the untrained eye, yet one may grade MS63 and the other MS67, and that difference can turn a modest coin into a four-figure sale. That's because grading focuses on microscopic marks, strike quality, luster strength, and surface preservation, details most casual owners never notice. Now let's talk about varieties and errors, because this is where quiet wealth discovery sometimes happens. Some 1964 pennies show double die characteristics, repunched mint marks, or unusual strike anomalies that escape the mint's quality control. These coins aren't common, but they're real, and collectors actively search for them. When authenticated, certain varieties have produced life-changing sale results for select examples, especially when preserved in high grade. This difference can completely change interest, because an ordinary-looking cent becomes something collectors chase, not because of age, but because of scarcity within the date itself. Another area collectors watch closely is color designation. Professional grading services classify copper cents as red, red-brown, or brown. A fully red 1964 penny, especially in high grade, commands dramatically higher prices than one that has toned or darkened over time. Two coins from the same roll can age differently based on storage, humidity, and handling, and decades later, that difference can mean hundreds or thousands of dollars. Now let's talk realistic value ranges, without hype and without dismissal. A worn 1964 penny in circulation condition is usually worth just a few cents over face value. Lightly circulated examples may sell for under $1. Uncirculated examples in lower mint state grades often trade in the $1 to $5 range. But sharply struck, original red examples graded MS65 to MS66 frequently reach into the tens or hundreds of dollars. And top population pieces, those few coins that survived in exceptional condition, have reached into the four-figure range at major auctions. These aren't everyday results, but they're verified sales, and they're the reason this coin still appears in serious collector conversations today. Here's where many people get confused. They assume age alone creates value, or that every old penny is rare. In reality, condition and scarcity within condition are what drive demand. Millions of 1964 pennies still exist, but very few exist in pristine, original, high-grade form. That's why patience matters. That's why knowledge matters. And that's why some people experience quiet financial discoveries decades after casually storing loose change. Now let's talk about mistakes owners make that reduce value, because this is critical. One of the most common mistakes is cleaning coins. Even gentle rubbing can permanently damage the surface and destroy collector value. A cleaned penny, even if shiny, is usually worth less than a naturally worn one. Another mistake is improper storage. Moisture, heat, and PVC plastic holders can cause corrosion, spotting, or discoloration that permanently reduces desirability. And another mistake is selling too quickly without understanding what you have, especially if your coin may be a high-grade example or a variety that deserves professional review. This is where many people get confused. Speed feels smart, but patience creates leverage. Taking time to learn what you're holding, comparing it with verified graded examples, and seeking knowledgeable input can be the difference between a small return and unexpected income. Collectors often say the real reward in coin hunting isn't just money, it's discovery. That moment when something ordinary reveals hidden financial potential, and the 1964 penny is a perfect example of that. Not because everyone is rare, but because a small number quietly rise above the rest, and most people never realize which ones they own. Here's a detail collectors quietly watch surface originality. Coins that haven't been cleaned, polished, or artificially brightened, even if they've toned slightly, often grade higher and sell stronger than coins that look unnaturally shiny. Authentic aging signals stability, and collectors pay premiums for it. Another overlooked factor is strike alignment. Coins struck slightly off-center, with broad strikes or with unusual rim characteristics sometimes bring premiums, especially when the errors are dramatic and visually obvious. While most 1964D pennies are perfectly normal, error coins from this year have surfaced and continue to attract attention. This difference can completely change interest, because collectors aren't just buying copper, they're buying scarcity, history, and survival quality. Now let's talk about why sellers who succeed often succeed quietly. Most people who discover valuable coins don't do it through hype. They do it through consistency, checking coins carefully, learning what collectors look for, and storing promising pieces properly. They don't rush, they don't assume, and sometimes, years later, that patience turns into meaningful financial outcomes, not from luck, but from awareness. The 1964D penny teaches an important lesson. Common coins can still hold uncommon potential, but only when condition, variety, and originality line up. That's why experienced collectors never dismiss everyday dates, and why they continue examining coins others overlook. This is where many people get confused. They think rarity always means low mintage, but rarity often means low survival in top condition. And in that sense, the 1964D penny is far rarer than its production numbers suggest, because pristine examples are genuinely hard to find today. If you have a 1964D penny, here's what to do. First, check for the D mint mark under the date. Then examine the surfaces under good light. Look for strong luster, minimal marks, full detail in Lincoln's hair and beard, and sharp lines on the Lincoln Memorial. Look closely for doubling, unusual spacing, or strike oddities. And most importantly, avoid cleaning it. Store it safely in a non-PVC holder and take your time learning about it before making any decisions. Because sometimes, what looks like spare change turns into quiet wealth discovery. Not overnight, not guaranteed, but real, documented financial potential when the right conditions align. And that's the real story behind the 1964D Lincoln penny. Not hype, not promises, just history, condition, and patience working together to create possibility. So before you dismiss that old jar of cents, take another look. You may be holding something more interesting than you think. And if you want to continue this journey, watch the next video on another overlooked Lincoln penny that surprised collectors with life-changing sale results for select examples. Because in coin collecting, knowledge always compounds, and sometimes so does value.